Yep, it's a gold box game. Don't you know you're gonna shock the monkey? Shock the monkey! Originally released in the summer of 1989, I believe in July, simultaneously for the Commodore 64 and MS-DOS. Today, in the first episode of Season 7, 6 years doing this, and overall the 100th review on my channel, we are covering the Gold Box game, the second in the line, Curse of the Azure Bonds, developed and published by Strategic Simulations Incorporated, an official Advanced Dungeons & Dragons computer product license from TSR. Ports will be developed for the Apple II, the AtariST, the Macintosh, Japanese-based PC, and 98. Of course, the version that we are showing today, the Commodore Amiga, which came out in the later months of 1990, I believe, in November or December. And this is actually the third Gold Box game to be released for the Amiga. The first one was actually Champions of Krynn, the first of the Dragonlance line of Gold Box games, which was developed by SSI themselves for the Amiga. And I guess by the time they were developing that, they figured, hey, why not have one of the best-selling RPGs, one of the best-selling computer games ever? Why don't we have that on the second best-selling computer platform in America? So they commissioned ports. Pool of Radiance was done by Ubisoft. I've done a review for that. You can check that out. And Micromagic actually developed this port for Curse of the Azure Bonds. And yes, this is an American NTSC game. Please show it in a 4:3 aspect ratio. Thank you. Please welcome back my OG YouTuber party, first seen in Pool of Radiance. Me, Shot, I'm not OG, but Lactobacillus Prime is Maximum RD, the Shadow's Nose, and Poloventurous, all OG YouTubers, as well my friend Stygian Phoenix, always with me. I hope you'll check out the description for links to all of their channels. We'll start today off with a look at the box. 1 meg RAM required. After you save the entire city of Phlan and looking at the Pool of Radiance, a simple trip to Tilverton should have been as easy as a noonday stroll. But it wasn't. Ambushed, captured, and knocked unconscious. You away with no idea who attacked you or how you arrived in Tilverton. You only know that 5 azure blue symbols are imprinted just under the skin of your right arm. Your only hope? Search the Forgotten Realms for members of the Alliance who created the bonds and regain control of your own destiny. Only then can you be free of the curse of the Azure Bonds. Now, as we take a look at the introduction text coming from the game, well, the meat of any RPG story, usually in this era anyway, is going to come to you from the manual, and especially in these Gold Box games, which often feature many journal entries to add depth and especially for copy protection reasons. You know, these games, they sold a lot. This game, Curse of the Azure Bonds, would sell almost 180,000 copies at $50 a piece. Yeah, that's about $9 million right there. Nice chunk of change. And Pool of Radiance, the original, would sell over 264,000 copies. All of them put together, you know, a lot of units with all of these Gold Box games. But a not so insignificant reason for those large sales numbers probably has to do with them having the best copy protection ever for a game. Large manuals with tons of story inside of it, essential to the enjoyment of the actual game. Now, I'd say that a reminiscent look at our journey from the first game, which is featured in the second game's manual, would be a good place to start. The city of Phlan had risen to prominence and then fell beneath an overwhelming tide of evil monsters. The ruined city was controlled by a powerful entity known only as the Boss. The battle to cleanse Phlan was an epic struggle. First, adventurers cleared the city block by block. Then they found and defeated the concentrations of evil monsters and men in the wilderness around the city. Finally, adventurers assaulted the castle where the evil leader held sway. The adventurers triumphed over Tyranthraxus and his minions only after the most heroic of combats. When Tyranthraxus was defeated, he did not die. His naked spirit rose from the body of the dragon and was drawn back through the pool of radiance. The pool drained away and the power of Tyranthraxus was broken. Phlan was free. Like most heroes, however, the adventurers who freed Phlan did not stay around. It is known that they took a boat from Phlan to the city of Hillsfar across the Moon Sea. From there, it is rumored that they traveled south and west in search of further adventure. So while this is the second in the line of the RPG Gold Box games, it's really the third in the Forgotten Realms saga, because Hillsfar is technically included in all of these. The Silver Box game, Action Adventure Hillsfar. I have reviewed that one. I hope you will take a look at that, and your characters from Pool of Radiance could go to Hillsfar, and then they could be transferred forward to Curse of the Azure Bonds. Not on the Amiga, however, as discovered during my review, because Hillsfar was actually released prior to all of these Gold Box games on the Amiga in 1989. I don't believe they recognized the save files between the different versions, so on the Amiga, it's a no-go. Maybe some people could mess around with a hex editor or something and toggle a value which would say that this game had been through the Hillsfar scenario. And if the game sees that you've been through Hillsfar, you will get some extra helping hands along your way. You'll get a couple more journal entries. I think some of the battles will be joined by your friends from Hillsfar. I'd like to see it myself. I think I found a couple of those journal entries just while reading the ones I never saw. But yes, we shouldn't forget Hillsfar in this series of games. What are we doing in Tilverton anyway? I'm beginning a new journal. My old journal is gone, along with all the party's equipment. Right here to try to make some sense out of our spotty memories. We'd all agreed to come south of Tilverton to seek the lost princess, Nasia of Commodore. Tilverton is on the border between the Dalelands and Commodore, and was the last place the princess had been spotted. Somewhere along the road at Tilverton, we were attacked. The brigands must have been invisible, because some of our party went down before we knew what was going on. I vaguely remember dark faces and evil-looking helmets firing crossbows into our midst. The crossbow hits were not fatal, but every hit seemed to drop its target. I remember getting hit in the arm. The wound blazed like fire. My head swam. Now we awaken Tilverton with our wounds healed. Our equipment is gone, but we have found a stash of coins. I overheard a servant mention the date, but I'm not sure I believe it. If the servant speaks the truth, it is almost a month since the ambush. Almost anything could happen in that time. It seems that almost anything did. Each of us woke with 5 azure blue symbols imprinted on our sword arm. These symbols are not tattoos. They seem to exist below the skin. They occasionally feel like they're moving. We devised a plan of attack. Our spellcasters will prepare their spells. We will purchase new arms and armor. Then we are going out into Tilverton to find what is going on. Someone must know, and I don't care if we have to roust every priest, sage, and bartender in this town to find out. So you will see that I have just gotten rid of Lactobacillus Prime. Dropped him from our party. That is because this game adds some new character types, some new races, and Paladin and Ranger are among them, and we are making Lactobacillus Prime a Paladin. And I've also, unlike the previous characters, I actually put Lactobacillus Prime in there with a good roll instead of just maxing out his stats. I wanted to give myself a little bit more of a challenge there, and as a Paladin, I always like having a Paladin in my party. They're fairly good fighters, not quite as good as a regular fighter, but they're almost as good, and they have extra, healing ability once a day. It's like a cure critical wounds kind of a heal to one of your party members, and later on, once they gain some levels, they can cast some clerical spells. And that ain't all the quality of life improvements that this game brings you compared to the original. Now, the big one is the fix command. When you encamp, you have an option to fix your party. The logic is you have rested, you have memorized your healing spells, and you have cast them upon your party. And it the same amount of time that would have passed had you done that manually, like you had to do in the original game, is supposed to pass. I find that doesn't actually happen. The game just, seems to roll a dice and decides, should your party heal itself completely, and it usually does, You can get a battle from the fix command, but it is nowhere near the amount of time you would get if you actually rested. So while the fix command is a wonderful improvement to the game, it is implemented wrong. So I actually had to dig quite a bit to find the actual release date for this Amiga version, because as you can see here, it was announced to be coming by SSI as early as July, August of 1989, courtesy of Azure Bonds, AD&D Pool of Radiance, AD&D Hillsfar. Hillsfar would come out just a month later, I believe. Now, if we fast forward over a year later to September of 1990, you will see that AD&D Pool of Radiance is still waiting to be released, and we have received AD&D Champions of Krynn. A star next to the game indicates that they have received the game for review. That is why I'm saying Champions of Krynn is the first of the Gold Box games to come out for the Amiga. But finally, by December of 1990, AD&D Curse of the Azure Bonds has a star by its name, indicating the game has been received by info and is out. So probably at least a month prior, in November, it had finally come out. From March of 1991, Commodore's revolving door. Well, the revolving door in Commodore's executive suite has turned once again, ejecting Harry Copperman and admitting James Dion. The surprise this time is that Copperman has not been banished, but kicked sideways into a vice president's position with Commodore International. It is simply a fact of life that Commodore US changes bosses nearly as often as some third world countries swap generalissimos. I suppose as long as Commodore US continues to make a poor showing in the annual report, there will be a new general manager every fiscal year, but this time there have been some changes that might make that a less likely event. James Dion, the new U.S. General Manager, is the former head of Commodore Canada. Some insiders tell us he has the reputation of being Commodore's hatchet man, brought in to cut unnecessary jobs and costs. This he is apparently doing. Is that all bad? Not necessarily. It's obvious to us that the cats and engineering expenses should probably be borne by Commodore International anyway, since both work for the benefit of Commodore worldwide. That CBM was top-heavy in administrative management and marketing people is no secret. Most large corporations are, and the cuts will certainly not mean any big cutbacks in Commodore advertising and marketing. You can't cut something that is practically non-existent. We've heard some speculation that Commodore US will fall back to marketing the Amiga as a game machine like they do in Europe, but I don't think that's a real threat. In Europe, Commodore doesn't compete with Nintendo. It's a different market, and they know it. That's why they offer two models of the Amiga 500 here, one for gamers and one for serious users. Commodore also sells a much higher proportion of Amiga 2000s and 3000s here than in Europe. Commodore knows the U.S. isn't a games market. They won't be shifting gears. What we do expect to see is more cost-cutting and personal shuffling and creative accounting, mostly to make the U.S. market's profit-loss column look a bit better to the stockholders on the next annual report. Aside from that, we'll be surprised if you see much in the way of radical change from the consumer's point of view. The review, Curse of the Azure Bonds, receiving 4 out of 5 stars. SSI/EA. EA was the distributor of the game and many games for many companies. So they actually physically shipped them to the store. But I'm not sure why they actually credit them here. They didn't usually credit the distributor. But SSI was still the publisher for the game. Curse of the Azure Bonds is a sequel to Pool of Radiance and third in the series of official AD&D role-playing adventures. After being ambushed while marching to Tillerton, you find 5 blue marks on your arm, which have the power to control your actions. New player types and spells are introduced, and characters can be transferred from Pool or Hillsfar. Graphics and animation have been noticeably improved. Combat encounters are still emphasized, but are made more manageable. Azure Bonds is the most playable AD&D game yet. Judith Kilberry Cobb. Now, they also reviewed the Commodore 64 version in November of 1989. If you want to compare it with their thoughts on the Amiga, they'd only got 3.5 out of 5 stars. And unfortunately, the review is line by line the exact same one that the Amiga got, except for the very final one. Judith Kilberry Cobb, that was some very lazy writing right there. You quickly hide their bodies. You probably noticed that this game has a ton more elements of story injected into it compared to pool of radiance, which was much more, you got story, but it came in increments there. This one, it's a constant flow. Now, Curse of the Azure Bonds is looked at by some as the best game in the entire line of Gold Box titles. And thinking about it hard, because that's what I had to do, because I don't agree with them. It's a fine game, and don't get me wrong, it's better than good. It's a great game, I believe. But it happens to be one of my least favorite Gold Box games. And I think the thing that makes me not like it as much as the others is the thing that makes other people think it's the best title in the line. It's that constant influx of story, and you're really being pointed along. It's made very clear to you from the beginning what your quest is. You've got these Azure Bonds. They weren't there before. You need to get rid of them. And you do that one at a time, and you are pretty much pointed where you need to go. You can't even go anywhere. From the first town, you are stuck in a very linear line. The game is the most linear of the entire Forgotten Realms story. You can make an argument that the perhaps the Dragonlance line is comparable in its linearity, but certainly within the Forgotten Realms line, this is the most linear game that you're going to get. On the overworld map, you can even go to a spot where a person will tell you exactly the best way for you to go, the easiest way for you to go. Now you can ignore him and go in a different direction, and the challenge will be a little bit higher there, but you're pointed where you need to go. There are no side quests or anything in this game. Now, there are optional areas, and I actually, for the first time ever, I went through every single one of these optional places, and yeah, there's no point to them. There is one memorable battle with a very large amount of beholders, and that's the only one worth noting. None of it connects to anything. It's not even, oh, please find my ring from somebody in a town or something. There's no quest associated with it, even a small quest. It's all pointless, the optional areas. It's a very linear game. It's what makes me personally feel as if it's one of the weaker titles in the line, but it also makes me understand why so many people look at this one as the best in the line. I understand that, but it's not how I personally feel. So as we finally claw our way out of Tilverton in what felt like a quarter of the game and reach the most amount of freedom that we're going to get, let's talk about the overworld here. The area shown on the map stretches from Tilverton in the southwest to Phlan to the northeast. It includes the center of the Elven Court, the western shores of the Moonsea, and several of the dales surrounding the Elven Court. The area is sparsely populated with major concentrations in the cities and towns and farms, covering the intervening dales. A short history of the Dalelands and the Elven Court. 1,357 years ago, humans moving north encountered the Elven Court, a huge outcropping of forest south of the Moonsea. These humans sought and received permission from the Elven rulers to settle the dales around the forest. The standing stone was erected to commemorate the occasion. South and east of the Elven Court lay the human kingdom of Sembia. The Sembians cut at the forest to make planks for the ships. The elves put a stop to this by crushing the Sembians at the Battle of Singing Arrows 473 years ago. The elves and humans then made an agreement that allowed the humans to push a road from Sembia past the Standing Stone to the Moonsea, where the road met. The Moonsea, the city of Hillsfar, grew around the Moonsea. Hillsfar and other cities prospered. Zhentil Keep rose to power, fell from grace, and rose again under the power of the Zhentrium. Phlan rose to prominence, was devastated by blight, ruined by the dragonflight, and then rescued from the permanent enslavement by a band of adventurers. That was us. But the Battle of Singing Arrows on the road from Sembia to Hillsfar started a great debate among the elves. Could elves and humans live side by side, or was human expansion a threat to the lifestyle of the Elven Court? For hundreds of years, the elves secretly debated among themselves. Scant years ago, they made their decision. The elves began their retreat. The retreat caught the humans around the Elven Court by surprise. Almost overnight, the inhabitants of the court and the magnificent city of Myth Draenor seemed to disappear. Once the elves decided to leave, they left swiftly. The retreat left a huge area empty. Evil forces quickly took advantage of the power vacuum. The bright elven force quickly became became dark and foreboding. The fabled city of Draenor fell into ruins and was overcome by evil creatures, and the road to Sambia to Hillsfar was no longer a safe trek for fat merchants, but a dangerous gauntlet for the adventurous traveler. In terms of the combat, you have to take note that you're going to be facing a lot more humanoid creatures, which can cast spells on you, and you have to be able to deal with them. I'm going to move maximum RD here to hit the cleric with, that's casting a spell. He loses the spell. You got to be aware of this. Get the spellcasters out of the picture. And when you do that, I feel like this game is actually among the easier Gold Box games. Probably not as easy as Champions of Krynn was. Still harder than that one. But easier overall, which again might be a reason why a lot of people look at this one as the best of the series, because the series is renowned for being hard. Here's something I absolutely adore about this game. You may call me Silk. I have been waiting for a group such as you, Stygian. Step forward and receive our mark. Will Stygian step forward? You get a choice there. This is for any female, I believe, in your group. And if you don't have a female in your group, well, you can't have their help. I absolutely love when these games, put the actual party members into the story, use their names in some way. They don't do it all that often. The Savage Frontier series is probably the best if you like that element. But when they do, I adore it. And yes, it's still a Gold Box game. You see this battle here. This is a very, very difficult battle. Just because I say it's easier than the rest of them, it doesn't mean it's easy. There's still, I died a few times. I had to reset a couple other times, And even when I didn't, some of these battles, even when I won them, they felt difficult. It's still a Gold Box game. From Dragon Magazine, September of 1989. Glued to the Terminal by Azure Bonds, receiving 5 out of 5 stars, $49.95 for the DOS version, also the Amiga version, and $39.95, $10 cheaper for the Commodore 64. Early this year, we read one of the best Forgotten Realms fantasy adventure books published by TSR was Azure Bonds by Kate Novak and Jeff Grubb. The adventure involves a heroine named Alias who, upon waking in an inn, discovers that strange blue sigils have inscribed onto her right arm. Only through an exciting adventure with Rasketo the Halfling Bard, Akabar the Mage, and Dragonbait the ever-so-quiet Lizard Man does she come to realize that those sigils are more than simple magics. SSI and TSR produced Curse of the Azure Bonds as the third in their line of computer-based fantasy role-playing adventures based on the AD&D game and the Forgotten Realms setting. The offering is superb, both by itself and as a follow-up adventure. Our review team has logged over 120 hours of gameplay. You definitely won't get bored during this adventure. We have played the PC MS-DOS and Commodore 64 versions and have enjoyed both. You needn't have played Pool of Radiance or Hillsfar to become embroiled in Curse of the Azure Bonds. Magic is a critical feature of Curse of the Azure Bonds. Not only can your spellcasters fling magical furies and healings throughout the game, but they can also scribe new spells and gain spells as they advance in level. There are 5 levels of clerical spells and 5 levels of magic spells. So, what's to be expected in Curse of the Azure Bonds? More encounters than we've seen in almost any other adventure game, and all of these encounters advance the plot of the game. You decide whether to complete some of the quest or activities requested of your party. The choices are as diverse and important as in real life. You must deal with each situation in the same manner that you approach your AD&D or other FRP campaigns. But this time, you are the one making the decisions for the entire party. You'll find yourself truly concerned about each individual's well-being. As the adventure continues, you'll find that tearing yourself away from Curse of the Azure Bonds is the most difficult decision of all. So a couple things about that review now. While the combats do indeed, advance the plot, quite a few of them. If you were upset about Pool of Radiance and all of its random encounters, well, there are very, in comparison with Pool of Radiance, there are few random encounters. There are still, each area usually has, between, 6 and 15 random encounters, and once you pass whatever that limit is, you won't get any more of those. But still, in the area that you're going through, you should be expected to, face a certain amount of enemies, and then you go on to, the main bad guy for that area. It certainly feels less like random encounters in this game. But they also said that you decide if you want to complete a given quest or not. No. Now, see this? Here's an example. You can do this or not. Strangely, the knight is, though, in a mage contest, the knight is the one that is most powerful. The game has these little moments. You can have a female character become part of the Swanmays, and that can help you, or you can decide not to. Those are your choices. It has choices, but the main quests, those sigils that are on your arms, you cannot decide. You have to do them. You can decide which one to go to first, although there is a preferred path that you're kind of pointed to. But you have to do that. You have to do all of them. You have to get rid of all of them to face the final bad guy. That is required, so you don't really have a choice in your quests, like they state. Back to Dragon Magazine, April of 1990. The official ballot for the Origins Awards, 1989, presented by the Academy of Adventure Gaming Arts and Design. Number 7, the Best Role-Playing Adventure, 1989. These are for the Paper Pencil modules. Courtesy Azure Bonds for the AD&D Forgotten Realms setting, TSR Incorporated. So, there was the game, there was the book first, the book came first, and there was also a separate adventuring module. It was up for the Best Role-Playing module. Oh, but that ain't all. For the Best Fantasy or Science Fiction Computer Game of 1989, Curse to the Azure Bonds, up against Dragon Wars, Mech Warrior, Sword of the Samurai, and War of the Lance. And while it did not win the Best Module, it did win the Best Fantasy or Science Fiction Computer Game of 1989, Curse of the Azure Bonds, Strategic Simulations Incorporated. Computer Gaming World, September of 1989, writing the cover of the magazine. Of course. Hello, Scorpia. Since this is a follow-up game, you can transfer your characters from Pool of Radiance, and it's a good idea to do so. It will give you a head start in the game. Characters will transfer with no weapons or equipment, though, so you won't have the use of any of the goodies you picked up in Pool of Radiance. Well, so simple and matter-of-fact, and you just go on to another thing after that, huh? It's no big deal not having your equipment. Is that so, Scorpia? Yet Champions of Krynn has one of the worst endings of all time, according to you, because it had, the decency of telling you ahead of time that the next game you wouldn't have all. You wouldn't have all of your equipment. You would actually have most of your equipment, but all they had to do to fool you, Scorpia, was to start the next game with no equipment whatsoever. And you're perfectly cool with that. Champions of Krynn, one of the worst endings of all time, according to Scorpia, because it ended with a couple of your godly items going away from you. But no big deal right here. When 4 of the bonds have been removed, and only then, you go on to the final showdown with our old friend from Pool of Radiance, Tyranthraxus, in the ruins of Mythdraenor. This time around, he's a storm giant, which means, yes, more lightning bolts. He really does have an obsession with them. The ending itself is, alas, rather disappointing. Unlike Pool of Radiance, once Tyranthraxus has been defeated, for good and all, finally... No, not exactly. The game ends. You won't be able to go anywhere or do anything except save the final position, presumably for the next sequel. I do have some concerns about the random number generator used in the game. My experience over many combats is that the RNG seems too often weighted towards the low end for characters and towards the high end for monsters. If Azure Bonds is really using the tables as put forth in the original Dungeon Master's Guide, then most of the critters should not be hitting as often as turned out during play. If character transfer is to remain a part of the series, which I certainly hope it does, then emphasis needs to be placed on role-playing rather than a lot of fighting. The true heart of AD&D is not rolling the dice, but the relationship between the characters and their world. Bottom line, standard follow-up, better than Pool of Radiance in some ways, but combat still predominates. And of course, I was not the only one to take shots at Scorpia. SSI Inter-Office Memo. Okay, they got us. You're right. We don't always give the player an even break. In fact, there's even a place in the game where we boost the monster stacko and hinder the players. Scorpia's observation about the Ukjugs is in fact entirely correct. When you first enter the Tilverton sewers, you get a message warning you about slippery footing and combat being difficult. What you aren't told is that while you're in there, Thaco mod is set to -2 and AC mod is set to +2. In effect, the good guys are at a -2 to hit and the bad guys are at a +2. Ouch! Obviously, the Tilverton sewers aren't the only place where probabilities get skewed. Like all good DMs, our authors bend the dice to suit the story. Of course, we usually drop some pretty broad hints in the narrative text. So, if it looks like you're not getting the die rolls you should, odds are you're not. I love it. I love it. And kudos to Computer Gaming World for including that there. Now, they are answering that very seriously. For the readers they know are going to be curious about this point that the Scorpia makes, but it is dripping with, are you really a reviewer? Is this really your job? Scorpia also mentions the ending in a negative light, and it doesn't seem to be by what actually transpires in the ending. It's by a singular event. She seems to have a habit of that, like in Champions of Krynn. She gets triggered by certain things, and in this game, well, you can't continue past the ending, is why she actually likes Pool of Radiance ending more, and I think this has a better ending than Pool of Radiance. The actual ending is better. By the time I was done with Pool of Radiance, I had done everything I wanted to do. And in this game, it is made very obvious to you when you are approaching the final area. So, it's just do what you wanted to do if you haven't done it all. Do it before you go to the final area, before you actually finish the game. That's all you gotta do. That's not a big deal. You know, the ending itself, the end sequence, isn't fantastic or anything, but I do feel it is better than the Pool of Radiance ending. I don't feel it's as good as the Champions of Krynn ending, Scorpia, just FYI there. She also mentioned she wants some more role-playing, which actually does happen more often in terms of your actual named characters in this game. And with the story influx, you know, I figure she would actually like this one a little more. But Scorpia, always an entertaining part of my reviews, I feel. I love you, girl. Say hello to the beautiful Alias and her companion Dragonbait, who are joining our party. A good chance to check out our journal entries here. I'm afraid that I know all too well what those bonds signify. I was bonded once as well. The story began when a Master Harper wanted to make sure that his work would be preserved in pristine form. He was revolted at the thought of his songs and stories being corrupted and changed over time, as all performing arts eventually are. He attempted an experiment to create a kind of flesh golem, a simulacrum of a human being that would be an immortal vessel for all his work. In this way, he hoped to cheat the effects of time. Unfortunately, the Master Bard made a mistake during the creation of his vessel, and one of his assistants was killed. When the Conclave of Harpers found out about the experiment and the reasons behind it, they were appalled. The Conclave stripped the Master Bard of his powers, his magical objects, and his name. They wiped his songs and stories from the collective memories of the entire realm. It was as if he had never existed. A powerful group of magicians and monsters recreated some of the Nameless Bard's experiment. They tracked the Nameless One to his dimensional prison and offered to help him build his vessel. In exchange, the group would have a hand in defining the vessel's instructions. The Nameless Bard's obsessions with his work blinded him to the evil intent of the group. He agreed to build another vessel. I was the result of their efforts. In order to bring me to true life, they needed to sacrifice a being of truth and goodness. With the aid of the Nameless Bard, Dragonbait was able to thwart the evil ones by gifting me with a portion of his spirit. The Nameless One sacrificed himself and engineered Dragonbait's and my escape from the evil ones. After our escape, I woke in a strange place with manufactured memories and symbols such as yours on my arm. In order to remove my symbols, I had to overcome the compulsion of the bonds. Each bond is like a magical kiss put on you by the person or group represented by the symbol. Your only hope is to destroy the person or group that was involved in creating your bonds. I see the mouth and hand symbol of Moander on your arm. The cultists of Moander were some of the evil ones involved in my bonding. Since you are here in Carius Bond, I assume that he has managed to gather enough power to attempt his return. Let Dragonbait and I help you. We have battled this evil before. So I had read the entire book prior to doing this review, just so I could offer to you an accurate synopsis of it all. And it turns out that journal entry right there, that's pretty much the whole book in a nutshell right there. It's a fantastic book, fully recommended. If you like this game, you will love that book. And while the master plot of the Bonds is, the exact same story in the game and the book, it's, the actual people behind it and the actual story. It's like an entire new book when you are, playing the game. So both fully recommended. Both, similar but different. And I love that a lot of the good characters managed to make their way into this actual game. Not really the bad characters, except for Moander here. He was in the book, but all, surprising how many of the good characters. The Nameless Bard is in this one. Alias, obviously. Akabar is in there. The Halfling Bard, Skittle, is in this game. And in the very beginning of the game, when we were attacking the impersonator that is the king, that is a funny little comic relief character that is in the book as well. And when he says, "Oh no, not again," he's referring to what happened in the book there. Back to Computer Game World, where I found Curse of the Azure Bonds rating as high as number 4 in the Reader's Top 100 list. Here it is during a time when it was actually out for the Amiga, reaching number 54. Now here's an actual sales chart from November of 1990, pretty much when the Amiga version was brand new, at number 18 there, all formats combined. When the charts went system-specific later on, so this is a few years after Curse of the Azure Bonds had first been out, just to show you that these Gold Box games were selling on the Amiga. Number 3 is Dark Queen of Krynn, a Gold Box game. The Compute Choice Awards, January of 1990, the best of the rest for the Commodore 64, Curse of the Azure Bonds, with incredible success. SSI's new Advanced Dungeons & Dragons series tackles the challenge to squeeze a full-blooded fantasy role-playing game onto the Commodore 64's limited memory pool of radiance. First in the series was big, bold, and, on the Commodore 64, almost unplayable. Curse of the Azure Bonds streamlines the system even as it adds strong new features. The result is a playable adventure with fast disk access. No mean feat on our favorite machine. Triple your fantasies and ad for Curse of the Azure Bonds. From SSI's 1991 catalog. Over 150,000 sold. Special features include new player character types, high-level advancement, deadly new monsters, over 24 high-level spells, a full-screen overland map that allows fast movement from adventure to adventure, and much more. You have displays of the IBM version, and apparently they say Amiga display on the bottom there. That is incorrect. That is the DOS display. I know, because it's gray. But I will note that for their Pool of Radiance entry, that they're only using Amiga displays for their screenshots. So as we take a look at one of the more memorable areas of the game in Zhentil Keep here, a very strong role-playing here. I can really feel myself going into this world. Hey, buddy, watch right here. Look, on their arms, that's them. And there's a very funny one with a dog coming up that you should definitely read. But we were showing SSI's catalog there and how they showed the Amiga version for Pool of Radiance. We should talk about the graphics of this game, and in particular here on the Amiga, as the dog piddles on my leg. Now, the Amiga versions of the Gold Box games vary in quality based on who ported them. Pool of Radiance from Ubisoft was the one that was most significantly better on the Amiga because they completely redid all the graphics. But, Champions of Krynn, Death Knights of Krynn, big differences there on the Amiga. And even when the DOS games went full VGA, the Amiga games were at least as good or just slightly less than them. And the worst the Amiga ever did with the EGA games is they were only slightly better than the DOS versions, which would include Curse of the Azure Bonds here. And so the game is based off of the DOS version, but they have done the little things. They've altered some colors. You will see in the outside world that it looks more like artificial turf, the grass on DOS, but it looks more like grass on the Amiga. So they changed the colors a little bit there. Our interface has changed. Over on DOS, we have a cracked marble kind of look to the borders, and on the Amiga, it's a chain link look. The big thing, and it's all I ask, the minimum you can do when porting from EGA DOS to the Amiga is change the flesh tones. It's my biggest pet peeve with, Sierra. They refuse to even lift the tiniest little finger and just alter the flesh tones from red to peach. Just that little tiny thing makes so much of a difference in the quality of the game, if you ask me. So this port from Micromagic isn't overwhelmingly better, but it has the little things, especially with those sounds. Definitive version, I believe. Could they have done better? I believe so. This took me 10 minutes to do, to make the actual title screen a million times better than that 4-color piece of garbage that they have in blue there for DOS and the Amiga. 64 colors upper right, 32 bottom left, and 16 bottom right. This one was only a 16-color game on the Amiga. It was better than DOS, but they could have done even better, as you can see right there. They didn't even frame the title screen right. They got Dragon Bait cut off. Now I've run across people who actually think this game looks better than Pool of Radiance on the Amiga. They are factually incorrect with that thinking, but the reason they think that, I believe, is because the Pool of Radiance was, it was a 16-color game on DOS, but it used solid colors, all solids. On the Amiga, the graphics were completely redrawn and upped to 32 colors, but they remained solids. And a port is only going to stray so far from the original. Yes, you can redraw the colors, but, you risk completely destroying the game if you go too far. So they remained solid colors. Here, it's 16 colors, but they add the art of dithering to it all. And it's intelligent dithering, too. You put two greens together to get another third green. And they put more details into the pixels. Look at the beholder here. All the little lines and the eyeballs and stuff. It's all that tiny little detail that is in there. In the original game, it was very solid colored monsters. So, because it's a newer game, the graphics have improved a little bit. And even though technically they are a downgrade from Pool of Radiance on the Amiga, there are people who would actually believe that it is an upgrade because of the way it was handled. They're called the Gold Box games because of the Gold Box and because of the game engine being the same throughout the entire series. So, but despite that, each game, I feel, does very well with having its own identity. They tweak the graphics, and they managed to make them look better with each version, even when they were using the same engine. To Britain, from March of 1991, Amiga Action. I believe this here is a reader's list for their favorite games. Under role-playing, at number 9 is Azure Bonds, 10 is Pool of Radiance, 2 is Champions of Krynn. US Gold would publish the game in Europe, and that's all they did. They did not design it, and it would cost £24.99. Doug says, it's Curse of the Azure Bonds is a very good RPG game. Most people who like this type of thing will enjoy it. I enjoyed it myself, but I think it's just a bit too similar to the other AD&D games that have been released. I found that the game wasn't as polished as the previous Champions of Krynn, and there are a few things in Krynn that made the gameplay better, which are not present in Azure Bonds. But with these nags aside, the game is a good RPG and worth getting hold of. It's important to know your history, and while this game did come out after Champions of Krynn on the Amiga, overall, it's only the second game in the franchise. Champions of Krynn was the third. Alex, having had previous experience with the brilliant Champions of Krynn, I was hoping that Curse of the Azure Bonds would be as good and as highly polished. I'm afraid I found Azure Bonds less appealing, as it is too similar to the previous releases. I found that the game is decidedly average and is similar to style to the Bard's Tale series, although I found Azure Bonds much better and enjoyable. On the whole, a fine product which RPG fanatics, if they enjoyed SSI's other titles, should think about purchasing. Graphics. Curse of the Azure Bonds features similar graphics to the other AD&D games, and as usual, they are adequate. Not brilliant, but not bad. 66%. Sound, rather a poor tune on the title screen. It sounds like it was ported straight from the Commodore 64, but the sound effects in the game are slightly better. 67%. Overall, 72%. From Zapp 64, January of 1991, covering the Amiga version. SSI are slowly filling in the holes in their advanced Dungeons & Dragons releases by producing Amiga conversions of their much heralded, but rather aged, Forgotten Realms series. Improved over Pool of Radiance, Curse introduces 2 new classes, Paladin and Ranger. High-level spells which include Raise Dead and a greater variety of monsters, which mean that, as far as I'm concerned, this was the first AD&D product to appear from SSI. Pools being basic D&D due to the dearth of AD&D features. Oh, give me a break. The combat system is very good, with the game allowing the player to deal in tactical maneuvering. Cursor is not perfect, though. A feature to enable the combat to finish in seconds would be an attraction to players who have no real interest in combat. If an RPG gets rid of combat, it has no business calling itself an RPG, if you ask me personally. Even with enhanced graphics and sound, Curse is dated. Amiga AD&D devotees should buy it to add to their collection, but I cannot help but wonder why SSI have bothered to release this conversion when they should be concentrating on bringing prompt Amiga conversions of their newer titles. As a true RPG, it has many of the drawbacks that Dungeon Master had. However, the game world is well designed, the plot and the opponents are imaginative, and the puzzles are challenging, with many thrills and spills to keep you on the edge of your chair. Captivating stuff. Atmosphere 68%, puzzle factor 67%, interaction 72%, last ability 90%, overall 71%. This guy certainly lacks the bigger picture. How dare you criticize a company for reaching into their back catalog and publishing games for your system? I so wish more people would cover the Amiga versions of this game, because most of them are the definitive versions, and even the ones that aren't. You know, these games are worth playing on the Amiga, and it's treated as if it never existed, or people just, oh, let's just go the easy way with GOG or something. They don't listen to me. They should, but they don't. Do you think I would have any leg to stand on whatsoever if all they had was Champions of Kryn and beyond? You know, they didn't bother to release the two that came before that. You think I could actually say, everybody, please play the Amiga versions of these games when they aren't all there? I couldn't do that. I'm sorry for the idiots who didn't have that perspective, but I thank you, SSI, for caring enough to bring the systems up to date. And it's not like they took time away from their people working on new Amiga games. No, while SSI worked on Champions of Kryn themselves, they farmed out Pool of Radiance to Ubisoft, and Micromagic did this one. How dare you blame them for what they did? And he talked about needing a quick way to be done with combat. You get rid of combat in an RPG, and it's nothing but a text adventure with graphics. That's probably why Scorpia always had such a problem with these games. I think she wanted a text adventure, and graphics kind of turned her world upside down. RPGs are separated from adventure games because of their combat, and no game series did it better, ever, if you ask me, than the Gold Box games. A wealth of different creatures, imaginative creatures from the actual AD&D, and the most tactical combat you're ever gonna get. Nowhere near enough love for this combat system back then or today. The Games Machine, November of '89, where I found a very interesting interview with Joel Billings, president of SSI. I asked Joel about SSI's continuing support for the Commodore 64. The Commodore 64 is still our #1 best-selling format for our AD&D role-playing products. It's outselling the PC 2-1. The ST is almost insignificant in the States. It's really disappointing. Red Lightning, for example, on the ST in the States is being outsold 2-1 by England. That's really ridiculous from our point of view, but we will probably keep doing ST products as long as we do Amiga conversions, and we can make a few dollars in Europe. I think the ST market will slow down in the US, but we have enough of a market for the Amiga to be worth it. So in effect, the Amiga is supporting the ST? Yes. As far as we're concerned, if it wasn't for the Amiga, there wouldn't be much ST software produced. The Amiga market in the United States supported the ST market worldwide. Now there's something you don't see the so-called Amiga experts discussing very much, do you? Now the bad thing about that is that the Amiga wouldn't have gotten what it deserved in terms of its capabilities because they were always thinking about the ST. This game came out for the ST. It was the only Gold Box game to come out for the ST, and it's identical to the Amiga version, which might cause some people to think that this was an ST port, but they are wrong. No, it was designed for the Amiga, but thinking about the ST. They designed it so it could go over to the ST easier. That's probably why it's in 16 colors instead of 32. Now, there are a few topics that I would like to discuss quickly because I've already gone more in-depth on those topics in previous reviews for this series. Economy sucks. Worst part of all the Gold Box games. You'll end up getting so much gold, you'll just dump it all, and there's nothing good to buy anyway, besides one magical shop, which does have some pretty cool items that you might be interested in. But all your good weapons and items are going to come from scripted battles. In terms of the items, we got some interesting ones, including the Ion Stones. Those will increase a particular stat based on color by 1, provided you're not already at your max, so I mostly use them with Lactobacillus Prime. There's the Dust of Disappearance, which I used for the very first time ever while playing this game for that huge battle with all of those beholders. I think it's mostly meant for this battle with Tyranthraxus if it's difficult for you, but I never used it before, so I just used it for that crazy beholder battle. Mapping. I'm showing you my main maps right now, and essential, absolutely essential to enjoying this game. I implore people to actually hand map these games, and those random encounters, and even in this game, which has less random encounters, and the random encounters aren't as large as in Pool of Radiance. If you hand map them, you will barely even notice they exist. I feel that so much of the frustration some people seem to have with these games comes from their refusal to ever even try to hand map these games. And no, the Gold Box Companion is not the answer. These games are built with the idea that you will be hand mapping. Please do that. Speaking of the XT a little earlier, ST format, April of 91. Some years ago, the first SSI game based on AD&D's Forgotten Realms was released. Despite becoming a bestseller on other formats, Pool of Radiance never made it onto the ST, but now its successor has, and very welcome it is, too. The graphics are hackneyed, varying from pretty to merely practical. The animation is basic at best. Overall, this looks like an 8-bit game. It's just not in the Dungeon Master class. Still, you don't need much in a game of this type, and everything at least helps maintain the atmosphere. It's a pity that Pool of Radiance isn't available on the ST, because the 5th level characters you start with in Curse are a little complex for the newcomer to this RPG system. Hillsfar players might do better, but may miss the arcade action of that game. You don't need reflexes here. Still, Curse of the Azure Bonds is guaranteed to keep you going for ages, although the graphics and sound don't use anything near the ST's potential. Once you get going, you don't even notice them. If you like role-playing and want a game with tremendous long-term interest and a really good storyline, you can't go wrong with this one. Graphics 5, soundtrack 5, intelligence 8, instant appeal 6, long-term interest 9, overall 74%. ST user April of 91. The challenge will keep role-playing fanatics busy for months on end, and what's more, the characters developed in this game will be fully compatible with the next release, Champions of Krynn. Well, the ST would never get another Gold Box game. Number 1, number 2, Champions of Krynn is a separate line. The characters are not compatible between this line and that one. All in all, it's an excellent game that's worth every penny. Graphics 67%, sound 54%, gameplay 84%, overall 79%. I also have a couple of German perspectives to peer at, because I'm not going to be able to translate it for you. But my belief is that Amiga Play here liked it quite a lot. Amiga Joker seems to have a mixed opinion, giving it a 74% overall. And finally, we have Power Play Magazine, where Curse of the Azure Bonds appears to be the 8th best-selling Amiga game. Also in there is Champions of Krynn at number 3. So overall, in terms of the European perspective from back in the day, I heard some pretty good thoughts there, like saying it's worth every last penny, but then they give it an overall score of 79%, which is a C+. I find magazines back then were so awful at quantifying the words they use in describing the game into an actual percentage for the game. They are so awful. That's why I don't ever give you percentages. I mean, the primary reason is because I respect your intelligence to listen to how I am describing a game, and for you to take the words I'm using and give my words a percentage yourself. I tend to respect the magazines which completely forgoed percentages a lot more than the ones which did. But the overall perspective I get from the European magazines was a mixed reaction. It's good, but this, and that are bad. And given how Europeans often felt about RPGs of that time, I consider that a win. In terms of the American perspective, there were a few that thought it was great to good. Origins Award, Best Fantasy RPG of the year there. But even here, there was some mixed opinions. Nobody thought it was bad, though. In terms of my final thoughts on this game, I consider this entire series the people's RPGs. They are the blockbuster movies that never got the critical respect they deserved. Curse of the Azure Bonds was not my favorite in the series, but it is different, as were all of the Forgotten Realms titles. It stands out, and it is a worthy successor to the groundbreaking Pool of Radiance. My honest feelings are you take this series away from its 8-bit Commodore 64 origins, and you design it on the Amiga or even DOS, and what you would have gotten was a ton more respect than the games actually got, unfortunately. The graphics should only be secondary, but my feeling is they were primary for quite a few people back then. Remember, I always do a 3,000 plus words written review for all of these at shot97retro.blogspot.com. Hope you'll check out my reviews for Pool of Radiance, Hillsfar, Champions of Corinne, and Eye of the Beholder. See you all later. Hope you enjoyed this 100th review. Goodbye.